Stuart has already given you the information about how many years I've been with the firm. So if you do a little arithmetic, you'll figure out how old I might be. But in any event, I first met Joseph Cohen and Ernest Lombardo in about June of 1951. I was looking for a job. I didn't know any lawyers in Buffalo, and there weren't the agencies that they have today to put people into positions to get jobs. So I interviewed with them. They told me they wanted a trial lawyer. That was the last thing I thought I wanted to be when I got out of law school, was a trial lawyer. But they had a job and I needed a job. So I took it. And here I am, 62 years later, and still trying to be a trial lawyer. Joseph Cohen and Ernest Lombardo were quite different in many ways, but they complemented each other very, very well. Their wives also were quite different, but they also were right for each of them. And coincidentally, both their wives were named Helen. As the councilman said, Joseph Cohen was born in 1909. And if you do the arithmetic and you figure out when he began his practice, that was during a very bad economic period in Western New York and in the whole United States, and actually in the whole world. So when Joe Cohen entered the practice in 1933, he was a product of the Great Depression. He started, as was indicated, and moved to various locations as a sole practitioner before he joined Ernest Lombardo. And I remember specifically after Joe died, talking to one of his contemporaries and talking about charging fees. And he said to me, "Dick, do you know what's wrong with you?" And I said, "No, what's wrong with me, John?" He said, Joe Cohen came into this practice in the Depression. He was happy to have a client come in, much less expect to charge a big fee. And he said, he trained you, so you've got the same mentality. I hope that's changed a little bit. Joe Cohen, and I'll tell you this little story about myself. I never called Joe Cohen Joe for many, many years. He was always Mr. Cohen, because he was that kind of a person. And maybe it was my problem too, but it took me quite a few years to call him Joe. But I'm very glad that I learned to call him Joe, because he became a good friend. Joe was more business oriented even then than Ernie Lombardo. Ernie Lombardo was the trial lawyer. Joe Cohen was the businessman. He did the corporate work, the estate work, the wills, and those kinds of things. Ernie Lombardo didn't much care for that. He liked the litigation, but we'll talk about Ernie a little more. In preparing for this little talk, I called his son, Ken, got a little information. Maybe I knew and maybe I didn't know. But Joe was a duffer golfer, his son called him. And he played at the Erie Downs course in Canada. He was a fisherman. But Joe was not one to join country clubs. But he did join clubs. He joined the Montefiore Club and the Optimist Club. And I'd forgotten about the Optimist Club until Kenny reminded me. And Joe was very diligent in making the meetings of the Optimist Club. And he was an optimist. He always saw the good in people, the good in conditions, good in things. He liked to collect coins. Excuse me. He was a good card player, played a lot of gin rummy and hearts, but he also liked gadgets. He had one of the first movie cameras, took a lot of movies of his family. He had one of the first dictating machines with little floppy, they call these things floppy disks now, I guess, contemporary, but these were real floppy disks. They were little green disks, and I remember using one when he first purchased them. He was an early advocate of networking. He was a great rainmaker. He met people, people liked him, he was a likable guy, so that worked out very well. He was also a hard-working guy. We always had to come in on Saturday mornings, regardless of anything, because he said, listen, the clients work, they're going to take time off to come to see you and lose money from work, so if you want to have a client, you better be available to see them when they're available. So Saturday mornings, we came in, excuse me, and met the clients. Kenny told me a story that I really had forgotten. Joe used to come to work on Christmas Day, bring his children. He said, I'm Jewish, I'm not Christian. It's not my holiday, I should work. And then he would go out afterwards and visit some of his Christian friends and it helped celebrate Christmas. Joe was a little bit on the fringes of politics, and Kenny reminded me, and I remembered after he reminded me, that I think Joe had political ambitions, but unfortunately he died much too young. Had he lived, I wouldn't have been surprised if he would have become a Supreme Court judge. As I said, Joe was a very friendly guy. He liked gardening, which kind of surprised me, frankly, because he was always dressed immaculately, and for him to get down in the garden and dig in the dirt kind of surprised me, but I became a kind of gentleman farmer myself, so I understood his reasoning. Ernie Lombardo was, as I said, different than Joe Cohen. Ernie was a little older when he was admitted. Actually, I suddenly realized he was only 4 years younger than Joe Cohen. As I said, Ernie was a trial lawyer, and when I first joined him in the Brisbane building, we only had 2 offices. So Ernie and I shared an office. I had a little desk in his office. I learned a lot just by listening to him on the telephone and being with him. And of course, he taught me how to be a trial lawyer. And I learned a lot from him. Ernie was also a rainmaker in his own way, but in a different way. He was a very social guy, loved people, talked with people. His wife Helen was the same. And they would do a lot of going out and meeting people. And it became almost a joke that wherever Ernie went, somebody at that establishment had his card. Whether it was the bartender, the waitress, the barber, his tailor, whoever, Ernie always left his card. Ernie enjoyed golf, joined Brookfield Country Club, and since they had no children, Ernie and Helen liked to travel, and they did a lot of traveling around the world mostly. Let's see, just 1 or 2 more notes. As I said, Ernie was not interested much in the business end, so Joe did that. Ernie was very competitive, however. Whether it was a trial, golf, cards, or whatever, he was a competitor and he wanted to win. And of course, that's good for a trial lawyer. I've been there 62 years. I learned a lot from these 2 guys. As I said, unfortunately, Joe died much too young, but he became a good friend, even though I called him Mr. Cohen for all those years. And Ernie, of course, lived longer, and I got to know him a lot more socially than I did Joe. They're both wonderful gentlemen. And I know that they instilled in me, and I tried to instill it in the other lawyers. If you want to succeed in this business, you got to work hard. And you got to put in your time. And hopefully we've succeeded in doing that in all the years since Joe died, since Ernie died. Thank you.